What's good, Atlanta? This is the Blog and Dirty Podcast, where Dirty Bird is the word if you haven't heard. I'm your host, John Buhler, the lead writer at fansided.com. Got a fun, action-packed show here today for you guys. I'm going to be talking about the draft, some off-season moves that could be on the horizon, maybe some players moving up, maybe just a lot of transactions. I mean, I guess we're a little bit less than a month out from the start of the new league year with free agency. So Atlanta's been onto the offseason for several weeks now, but this is an opportunity where I think teams, good or bad, can look forward to what could be coming down the pipeline. So going to be an exciting show today here. So let's just get started with the ultimate crossover for me with a slice of pumpkin pie. I wrote this for fansided.com, I believe yesterday, about 5 Georgia players that I believe could make a lot of sense for the Falcons in the 2025 NFL draft. So they're all in defense. And so this is obviously a major crossover with both fan bases. A lot of Georgia fans are a lot of Falcons fans and vice versa. It's not exclusive because Atlanta is a very transit market. Georgia's been a better run college football program than the Falcons have been in the NFL for the entire time the Falcons have been here. But for whatever reason, there's always some sort of trying to think of the word is the Falcons, for whatever reason, just do not draft Georgia players when the team's good. I mean, if the team's bad, who cares? I do think that like seeing what happened there in the Super Bowl with Philadelphia, with half the 2021-22 Georgia defense making plays for them in the Super Bowl, kind of makes you feel like a dumbass for not trying to go get players like this. I understand that Howie Roseman may be more inclined to be picking SEC players because he's a Florida guy. Georgia's their arch rival. And I think, maybe that matters. So if a GM has a background like in the Big Ten, like he went to Michigan, he may be more inclined to draft Ohio State and Penn State players. Terry Fontenot went to Tulane, so maybe that's why we get a lot of guys who play at the group of 5, but that's neither here nor there. Look, this is not – I want to preface this before I really kind of get in here with the guys that I think could make sense for the Falcons out of Georgia. This is not about Georgia, getting Georgia players in the Falcons. I know people – lose their mind about this all the time. What you have to remember is when a team is recruiting at a top 5 level in college football and is sustaining excellence, one that's regularly making the playoff or going to New Year's Six Bowls prior to this past year when that was a distinction, now it's one of the same. The expectation is those players that are recruited and developed at a very high level are going to make plays and at the next level, maybe a little bit easier. I understand that like guys that play at blue bloods like Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Texas, whatnot, may have a harder time going to bad to mediocre organizations where they're asked to do more. But I also kind of feel that like we've seen the tape, we've seen what they've done on college football Saturdays, and there's reason to believe that that could translate on Sundays. I mean, we saw, for example, Bijan Robinson. We knew that he was a stud at Texas. Texas had made the turn. He may have left right before they got ridiculously good, but like he won the Doak Walker. We knew that he played at a blue blood, well thought of recruit out of, I believe, Tucson. That's the type of player you need to go for. And we picked him over Jalen Carter, a Georgia player. Didn't matter. It's fine. But like you got to look for players who are going to help elevate your team immediately upon arrival. The day and age of like the slow, methodical build here with the Falcons is over. The time to win is now. So we're picking at number 15 this year, which is nice because we're not picking at 8 for the umpteenth year in a row. So that's a huge positive. But right now, I think the Falcons have 4 draft picks. Again, I don't know off the top of my head where they are in days 2 and 3, but I know we're picking at 15. Right now, there are 3 Georgia players on defense who could potentially be first-round picks. Those would be edge rusher Jalen Walker, edge rusher Michael Williams, and safety Malachi Starks. I think Atlanta has been mocked to taking any of these guys. I've seen them be mocked most notably to Jalen Walker for the most part. He may be coming off the board right around where Atlanta's picking. This is the reigning Butkus Award winner. He's different than Nakobe Dean or Roquan Smith. Not the same instinctual player or the traditional linebacker in that sense, but like he has the ability to wreck a game. I saw him do that against Texas twice this past year. And I think when you're doing that against the best competition, like you want a guy who's going to wreck a game against the Buccaneers twice a year. Maybe he could be that. Michael Williams offers a little bit more variance. He could potentially be a top 5 pick. Like I could see him going to Jacksonville possibly at 5, but he could also go like 21 to the Rams or something like that. The range with him is so much. Immensely talented. I believe he initially committed to play at USC from Columbus, Georgia. Played at Georgia for 3 years. He got hurt in the Chick-fil-A kickoff or Aflac kickoff, I think is what it is now. Whatever, the first game of the season versus Clemson at the Benz, on a kind of a cheap block by Clemson running back Phil Maffa. Michael Williams went there and was very impactful. Maybe he could be something like a fast climber like Trayvon Walker was coming out of Georgia. Again, the guy who went number 1 to Jacksonville over Aiden Hutchinson. Walker's really kind of made a name for himself with Jacksonville, but maybe not to the degree that, Hutchinson supposedly did before he got hurt with the Lions. What I'm getting at is these two guys offer a lot coming off of the edge. This is Atlanta's biggest weakness. It's been an issue for the entire time since I've been an adult or since I've hit puberty. It's been a long time since John Abraham played here. But, you got to keep adding to your arsenal in the hopes that the levee will eventually break. Maybe Arnold Ebiketie really finds a stride here in Raheem Morris's defense. Obviously, Jeff Ulbricht's coming over to replace Jimmy Lake. We'll see what happens. I think the day and age, yes, Lorenzo Carter kind of came over, was not really the same player. Maybe you go get Azeez Ojulari, another Georgia player. I think he played, no. Ojulari is from Marietta High School. I think Carter's from Norcross. But you're looking at a guy who's going to be able to provide pressure off the edge, basically get the Falcons defense off the field, allow it to recoup, and, get the ball in the hands of the offense with Michael Penix Jr., Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier, Drake London, etc. That's what I think the Falcons need to do. They just need to be better in crucial situations, getting off the field defensively, really tipping the time of possession in their favor. We can play ball control. I think one of the things that I really like about this team is they can play in multiple ways offensively. I felt under Arthur Smith, it was really just like we are going to sit on the ball, and we could never play catch up. With the Falcons now, with Zach Robinson's scheme, with the blessing of Raheem Morris, with Penix, and I guess Kirk Cousins before that, you can play catch up and you can win in multiple ways. But that's all going to be for naught if you can't, ice a game with a good pass rusher. So I'd love to see Michael Williams or Jalen Walker play for the Falcons. I'd also be in favor of Malachi Starks as safety. I think of the 3 guys that I'm about to mention, he's probably the most talented. This guy played at Jefferson High School, tremendous ball hawk. We know he's coached out very well in the secondary under Kirby Smart. That's his position group of note. I understand that safety is not a position that everybody prioritizes. I mean, Eric Berry's don't grow on trees, but you could look foolish for reaching on a guy where you can get him in day 2. I saw in Daniel Jeremiah's latest mock draft that he had the Philadelphia Eagles taking him at 32, because of course they did. They're going to draft another Georgia player. But he did have the Falcons taking Michael Williams at 15, and he had, I think, Jalen Walker coming off the board at 8 to Carolina. I would venture to guess that either Walker or Williams is going to be off the board to Carolina very quickly. I doubt that Abdul Carter falls past the top 5. I feel like if he's still there and Jacksonville's on the clock, it's we got to take him. So maybe Cleveland takes him to it at number 2. But you're kind of looking at Atlanta and Carolina are looking at probably getting the 2 pass rushers in note off the Georgia Bulldogs in the draft. Hopefully pick the right one, or more hopefully Carolina picks the wrong one, because it's up to them unless we move ahead of them in the draft. But I don't really know if Terry Fontenot is really a moving up type. I know that Thomas Dimitroff was a big fan of that, for better or worse. So that's kind of a thing there. And I guess to kind of tie a bow on it, the last couple of guys I wrote about, I talked about Smile Mondon Jr. at linebacker. I think he's a 4th round pick, maybe a very late day 2 pick. Very instinctive player, very much kind of more in the same sort of vein as what I said about Roquan Smith and Nakobe Dean. Seasoned player. I think he was a senior this past year for Georgia. I think he's a guy that we could use in the linebacking core if we really want to go in that direction. But more importantly, he kind of checks the box of where I think Terry Fontenot has gotten a lot of things wrong. He's nailed his 1st round picks for the most part. It's the day 2 where we're getting our ass kicked. You got to be able to draft guys who have the potential to be Pro Bowlers, who are going to come in and make an immediate impact right away in the 2nd and 3rd round. We can't waste our time with Richie Grants and Troy Andersons and Jalen Mayfields. Like, we got it. Ruka Rojo, maybe he'll be great. And I'm not going to I'll talk about Bralen Trice later. I mean, that's not fair because he got hurt. But, like, you got to get guys in day 2 who are going to help this team right away. And that's my big thing. It's not necessarily Georgia. You need to go for college football blue bloods. You need to go for guys. You need to go for players off of teams that have recruited at a top 10 level in college football year over year over year, because you are getting the best ingredients. You're not getting scraps. Don't settle for scraps. You're picking towards the top of the second round, like in the top half of the second and third round. Like, this is where you win and lose. This is where you win and lose. Teams like the Eagles always seem to find talent there in the second round. I mean, Cooper DeJean made a pick on his 22nd birthday. His second round pick out of Iowa only because he was hurt. Keely Ringo, another guy, the Georgia player. The list goes on. Baltimore always seems to find guys like this. So that's kind of where I feel with Spy Amond. And then I said Nazir Stackhouse was another guy. He'd kind of be more in the same sort of mold as like the Falcons. Like, we do draft Georgia players in the latter part of day 3, whether that would be John Fitzpatrick, Zion Logue, Justin Schaefer, kind of a big body, very much your 0 to 3 technique, defensive tackle. A lot of starts there at Georgia. Maybe he could stuff more on the run. Again, maybe can be a rotational piece. Probably nothing more than that, but we'll see what happens. I'd also take a flyer on safety Dan Jackson, potentially as an undrafted free agent. He may have been under-recruited out of high school. The guy makes plays. I mean, I remember him blocking that field goal versus Arkansas in 21, and that's how I knew Georgia was going to the national championship that year. Not going to the combine, I think that's dumb. This is a guy that I think, they talk about half the league being undrafted. I think this is a player that can make an impact wherever he goes. Maybe he goes to Atlanta, maybe he goes somewhere else, but I'm very bullish on what he could do at the next level. So that's really kind of how I feel about this. Again, this is not about Georgia players. This is about drafting the best players from the best schools to give yourself the best opportunity to succeed. Moving on to another fun topic. Let's do something like that with Kirk Cousins. What are the best potential landing spots for him this offseason, now that it seems like there's not going to be an option for him? I've whittled it down to 5. In no particular order, I would say those teams include the Steelers, the Raiders, the Titans, the Browns, and the Jets. So I would say the Titans are barely in here because they have the number 1 pick. I feel that they may very well end up taking Cam Ward number 1 overall. It doesn't matter that his comments are kind of off-putting, saying people are going to regret this. I mean, we saw Josh Rosen say that, and now he's getting his MBA at Wharton at Penn. So congratulations. He's going to make more money than you and I combined. But this is also Mike Borgonzi's first draft as the general manager in Nashville. I'll be honest with you. For as great as Abdul Carter could be, for as much as people really love the idea of Travis Hunter, not so much for me. He needs to pick a position. This is the NFL. This isn't college. This isn't Colorado. This isn't some gimmicky thing. This is the NFL. Go play cornerback for the Patriots and be great, or wide receiver. Help Drake May out. Either one, just pick one. But with the Titans, it's there's this belief that maybe they don't take a quarterback, and if they do, then maybe you roll the dice with Cousins. This is a team that's probably going to stink again next year. Brian Callahan's a very savvy offensive mind. This is a very you're not going to win with Tennessee right away, but this is a very soft landing spot for a player like Cousins who wants to start. I mean, it may be only 1 year. If the Titans really stink, maybe they're in the market to draft Garrett Nussmeier out of LSU, Drew Aller out of Penn State, whoever else emerges as the top quarterbacks in the 2026 NFL draft. I just like those 2 guys. Maybe Cade Klubnik out of Clemson. You get what I'm saying, right? But I think the Titans are very much at the bottom of that list. So really kind of crossing them off. The other 4, whether that would be the Raiders, the Browns, the Steelers, and the Jets, I think those are far more likely situations. I would probably say the next most likely, so 4 would be the Raiders. Because, again, even though there's an opportunity for him to start, they're going to be looking for a quarterback in 26 if they don't draft one in 25. I think there's a very strong possibility that the Silver and Black trade up from 6 to 2 with Cleveland to be in position to get Shedeur Sanders. He fits that Rebel brand. I think that could be very much in play here for them. But I also think that the big thing is Chip Kelly's the new OC. And Chip Kelly always likes his quarterbacks to be a little bit mobile. Yes, he had success there with, Nick Foles running the read option a little bit, but Cousins is not that. I mean, he's going to be 37 here very soon. He's had a major injury. He did not play well last year. For as much as I think he'd be able to run the offense and play very much the type of defensive-minded football that Pete Carroll will want to do, Chip Kelly may have other ideas. So I'm a little apprehensive about that. I know that I didn't mention the Giants offhand, but I'll probably throw the Giants and Jets in here next. These two teams need quarterbacks. The Jets are moving off of Aaron Rodgers. It's Aaron Glenn show. The Giants are picking number 3. They may move heaven and earth to move up to 2 to get Shedeur Sanders, but he's Deion Sanders' son. Cousins might fit very much the old school, the IBM of the NFL Giants thing, but they should have gotten rid of Brian Daboll and Joe Shane and just started over again. I don't know what they're doing. Maybe they end up drafting Drew Aller, who I think is a slightly better version of J.J. McCarthy, who I don't think is going to be any good for the Vikings. I could be totally wrong there, but that's just me. I kind of feel that like the New York teams, and I know that Cousins had been tied to the Jets when he initially went to the Vikings after leaving Washington, but I don't really see that either of those being the best scenario. I'd probably favor the Jets a little bit more because I sense a greater level of optimism around Aaron Glenn as a head coach because he strikes me as an alpha male. He's defensive minded. Anytime you kind of have a guy who's a defensive mind, big personality, if you will, it tends to work for the Jets. I think anytime you bring in there like a calculator nerd, offensive guru, you just get eaten alive because there's too many people in New York. There's a lot of meatheads that root for both of those teams. They're just not going to respect a dork. So that's why the Liam Cohens of the world, the Adam Gases, like that type of people, it's just not going to work for the Jets. But I think Cousins could have success there. I also think that he needs to avoid playing at MetLife like the plague. Is that turf's awful. Would not want to play there. If he gets another injury, that might be it for him. Then again, he had a lot of success there playing for Washington, and that's a field where sinew gets ripped to shreds. If not for that, maybe he doesn't have this career because RG3 is still probably playing. He was a terrible decision maker to play in the gimmicky offense at Baylor, but that's neither here nor there. So I think this really comes down to the two teams that I really think make the most sense for Cousins. That'd be Pittsburgh and Cleveland. Pittsburgh, again, I think he'd be able to check a lot of the boxes of what we saw out of Russell Wilson this past year. Same draft class, same age, 3rd and 4th round picks respectively. He's going to be able to hand the ball off. We know that Arthur Smith's going to want to run the ball because that's what he wants to do as a former tight ends coach and former offensive guard at North Carolina. The Steelers are going to win around 9 games. I don't know if Cousins really elevates their ceiling. Maybe if they get to an AFC championship, if like the Chiefs fall apart, or the Bills aren't as good, or the Ravens stink, who knows? But right now I kind of feel that they've got the same sort of ceiling as the Houston Texans, where like you get to the divisionals and that's about it. Maybe CJ Stroud, you can level up a little bit more. DeMarcco Ryans has to learn how to be a better head coach. He's getting there. But we've seen it with Mike Tomlin. And at some point, like you got to rip the Band-Aid off. You got to blow this thing up. I think, honestly, the Steelers probably are in their best interest is to draft Jackson Dart 21 because you owe it to yourself to see if you can get something good. He's not Kenny Pickett. He's better than Kenny Pickett. He played for a pro-style offense with Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss. That's really good. But like Cousins could be a cheap option. People in Pittsburgh are probably like, give me Sam Darnold. Pay a fortune for that. That's going to be probably the same sort of thing, and we're going to keep finding ourselves in the same sort of situation. Honestly, the Steelers have become the Cowboys. I'm just done with them. As long as Tomlin's their coach, I don't care. But I do think Cousins could have a lot of success there because that team has such a high floor, but a relatively low ceiling. So you're going to win about 9 or 11 games, win maybe a playoff game, and that's about it. The team that I think makes the most sense for Cousins is actually Cleveland. My reasoning for this is because first off, the Falcons are going to be fronting most of the bill with him. They're not going to be paying the roster bonus, which is why they're going to be cutting him as opposed to trading him. They may work with his representation. We'll see what happens. But as long as the Browns are still on the hook with the Deshaun Watson albatross of a contract, a guy who's so unlikable, who's dealing with another major injury, It does not serve the Browns to draft a quarterback at 2. There's just too much money allocated with one position. It's why I think they could draft Abdul Carter. It's why they could draft Mason Graham. It's why they could draft Travis Hunter. It's why they should honestly trade back with the Raiders or the Jets, maybe the Giants, maybe the Saints. Although we'll talk about the Saints later. I don't think that's necessarily going to happen. What I would probably say is Cousins is going to go in there. He's going to play competent. He knows Stefanski. They crossed paths there in Minnesota previously. Going to be able to hand the ball off to Nick Chubb. I think just improved quarterback play will do wonders for the Browns. I don't know if he's necessarily going to be the guy who's like going to tell Myles Garrett, hey, I think you should keep playing here. I could see Myles Garrett wanting to be traded. Honestly, he's going to be going to an NFC team, maybe the Lions. You're looking at it maybe here, but like somewhere between where the Falcons are picking and where the Eagles are picking in the NFC is kind of where I think Garrett's going to go. So you'll have more draft capital. Maybe you'll have another first-round pick, maybe somewhere between 15 to 32. And then you pick up more, you can really rebuild this thing. Maybe Cousins has a nice sort of tail into his career there in Cleveland. But I know that's quarterback Siberia. That's been a place where people really struggle. But I think for the most part, like team's not expected to do much. He elevates the floor. The finances work. What the Browns need and what he can provide seems to be more in line there. Again, I could be totally wrong. He could sign with a team I didn't even mention here. But I think right now I'd probably say Cleveland's my favorite spot for him to go to. Unfortunately, I don't think they're going to make a trade with the Falcons because I don't think the Browns are going to make trades with the Falcons anymore after the Julio Jones deal from 2011. So keep that in mind. But I would expect Cousins to be playing for maybe an AFC North team, Cleveland, maybe Pittsburgh. We'll see. Maybe he goes to the Jets. But that's kind of where I'm feeling with that. And, that's enough of Cousins. That's the past. The future's now. Let's go on to some big Penix energy here. I came across an article where they had a bunch of writers for ESPN and whatnot say, predictions about next year, who they think is going to go to the Super Bowl. At this point, I don't care and I'm not interested. I'm really going to pick the Ravens. But ESPN's Jeremy Fowler said he's got Michael Penix Jr. to be the breakout star next season. But will he be that for the Falcons? I think the talent's there. I think the offense is strong. I think that he's got plenty of weapons. I do think that there are 3 things that need to happen for Penix to become that guy. The guy where it's like, okay, we've got our franchise quarterback for the next decade. The Falcons are in good shape. They're going to make the playoffs a bunch. Maybe they can get in for a Super Bowl. The 3 things that need to happen. And honestly, these are all out of his control. I trust him to be able to be mature. I trust him to be able to run the offense. As long as he's healthy, I think we're in good shape here. The 3 things they need to do is they need to probably get one more receiver. I think that, they tried with getting Rondale Moore to come over from, the Cardinals and the Desmond Ridder trade. Well, they released Ridder. He started a game or 2 for the Raiders, and Rondale Moore got hurt during training camp. Maybe he'll be part of this team next year. But I'm a little skeptical there. I think you just need a little bit slightly better version of what you had at Ray McLeod at wide receiver 3. Fantastic wide receiver 4, but really played up as wide receiver 3. He's serviceable there, but you got to get better there. I don't know exactly if it's Rondale Moore. Maybe you sign Cooper Kupp once he's let go by the Rams. He knows the offense. Maybe you draft a guy in rounds 2 or 3. There's plenty of great wide receivers coming out of the NFL draft. I haven't really spent a lot of time thinking who checks that box for me. Got plenty of time before we get there. But Darnell Mooney made sense when we got him to be the number 2 beyond Drake London. You just need a little bit more rounded out receiving core. You also got to get better on defense. Maybe you get down another lockdown corner. Maybe you replace Justin Simmons with someone like Malachi Starks in the draft. You go get a pass rusher, like I said, with Jalen Walker and Mykel Williams. Maybe you pursue Khalil Mack in free agency. Maybe you trade for Myles Garrett. You got to do something because we can't continue to be bottom of the barrel in pass rush and expect for things to change. The margin for error from winning and losing in this league is so razor thin. If you can't protect a lead, you deserve to lose it because everybody out here is hungry. They want those wins. Jobs are on the line. We're talking about full-grown men with wives, children, mortgages to pay. This is different. This is not just fun playing with your friends in college. It may be getting a little more professional there with NIL and everything like that and the high stakes but this is business. There's only 32 teams. There's only 53 roster spots. Every player you have in the league, it's a precious commodity. Don't take it for granted. NFL stands for not for long. And I think finally the other thing is, I'm going to put it very bluntly, Raheem Morris needs to level up. This was his first. He'd been the interim at the Falcons before. He had been the head coach of the Buccaneers for a couple of years, 15 years ago when he was roughly my age. Now in his late 40s, early 50s. He needs to go out there and be a reason we win, not be the reason we lose. If that's putting more faith in Zach Robinson as the offensive play caller, that's huge. I understand that bringing over Jimmy Lake was probably like, okay, I got to put together a staff. I got a handful of guys who are going to come over with me from the Rams to make this happen. We didn't know if Jimmy Lake would have been a good defensive coordinator with the Washington Huskies. Pretty terrible last year. I was so down on the hire immediately. I'm like, this is not going to work. I'm not ready to throw dirt on Raheem Morris. I don't think that serves us. But I got to be very straightforward with you. This is a year where he needs to get better. The team deserves a quality head coach. We don't need any more learning on the fly. We don't need any more hold handing. We don't need any more schmoozing or pandering. Go out there being an effing head coach. Just do it. And I think having Penix out there leveling up, a lot of other players doing as well. Again, that is kind of the issue with a new staff. I think bringing back Jeff Ulbrich helps with this. He's going to be able to say, okay, I've got the defense figured out, or says, I've got the defense figured out. Raheem Morris needs to be the CEO type this team deserves. And if he can do that, then I think we can see Penix have the success. Because again, all three of these things are out of his control. He can't control what players are available when the Falcons are picking. He can maybe have some say in who he thinks Terry Fontenot should take, but that there's no guarantees that guy's going to be there. And he can't really control if it's in Raheem Morris's blood to be a great head coach or not. We don't know. He can be good. People are really bullish on him. They really like him. They really respect him. Maybe he's just a really good coordinator. But at the end of the day, Todd Bowles is an okay head coach. He's a great defensive coordinator. But he may be a better head coach than just okay. He may just be good because he's taking what Bruce Arians did, his biggest mentor, and he's still winning divisions with a rotating cast of offensive coordinators. I mean, gosh, you're losing Dave Canellas and Liam Cohen in back-to-back years. That's brutal. This is tough. This is not easy at all. But you gotta. This is a division where your head coaches are Kellen Moore, Dave Canellas, Todd Bowles, and yourself. You got to be better. So I love Jeremy Fowler's optimism about Michael Penix Jr. really taking it to the next level. But for this to happen, the organization needs to be better around him. This is the year that everybody needs to figure their ass out. Because if they don't, we're going to potentially end up with the longest active playoff drought streak. Eventually, the Jets are going to get it right. We need to get it right before them. Moving on to the second half of our show, we're going to go to everybody's favorite topic on the show, or I'm just saying that because I don't really know. Let's do some blow the whistle. One thing that they may need to consider is potentially re-signing friend of the show, Drew Dalman at center. So blow the whistle. Should the Falcons re-sign center Drew Dalman in free agency? I'm going to blow the whistle. I think after speaking with him ahead of last year, this is a guy who thinks the world of Jake Matthews, who really respects, the guys he's got on this offensive line. This is a really good unit. Chris Lindstrom is one of the best guards in football, if not the best. Caleb McGarry, it comes and goes, but he's been more good than bad of late. It's been solid. He's been with the team for since 2019. Like that. Matthew Bergeron's getting better, moving more to guard as opposed to center when he played at Syracuse. I got to be really straightforward with you. I mean, I can understand potentially going with Ryan Newsel if you want to go cheaper in that direction. He did play well for them. This is kind of back and forth here. The point I'm kind of getting at is the two guys that played center for the Falcons this past year, I feel like it's at least serviceable. I mean, I'm not saying that like we're going to be having an Alex Mack coming over from in free agency, but like maybe one of these guys could be Todd McClure. The gap between Todd McClure and Alex Mack with a lot of Mike Person nonsense and Peter Kahns and God knows what was going on the offensive interior there between at the end of Smitty and the start of Dan Quinn. We don't need that. We've got plenty of great players in offense. It's not about having the best guy at each position. It's about having the best five. So I think for the right price, I think you should bring Dalman back. Again, this is a guy you drafted in the 4th round. This is a guy that like, I don't know if he's ever going to be a Pro Bowler, but like you're looking at a guy who's well thought of out of Stanford, very intellectual, very smart, very, very kind, just a good person. You want to have guys like this in your organization. You want to be able to build on this. Guys you want to win with. And obviously, Atlanta's got to figure out its cap situation a little more. I think they're projected to be over at this time. We'll see what happens, who gets released and whatnot. But like, if this is a critical year where the Falcons need to make the playoffs, they can't be leaking like a sieve at center. So if it is Dalman, if it's Newsel, if it's whatever, that's great. But I'm more inclined to run it back here, give it one more shot, because I feel like with 2015 and 16, a lot of the same guys. You had Alex Mack at center. You had Andy Levitri and Chris Chester at guard. You had Ryan Schrader and Jake Matthews at tackle. I still remember that offensive line because it was that good. And we're trending in that direction. It's honestly, I'm not going to say leave it up to Chris Lindstrom, but like this is the best player of the team. This is the most talented guy we have. This is a future Hall of Famer we've got playing guard for us. Leave well enough alone. Bring him back. Make it work. I'm in favor of this. Bring Newsel back too. Like just because at this point, like I don't really necessarily think that we have the finances, particularly if we have to, when we move on for Cousins with all that dead cap we're eating, you got to be smart about this. And unless there's some guy in the draft that you absolutely love, then let's not mess around. Let's build forward. So yeah, I'm in favor of bringing Drew Dalman back. Pretty straightforward here with blow the whistle. Moving on to our penultimate topic with some grits blitz. How will injured Falcons like DeMarcco Hellams and Bralen Trice help improve the defense next year? I think this is a big thing that we did not really talk about very much throughout this season. Hellams and Trice both suffered season-ending injuries in the first preseason game versus the Dolphins. Hellams was a late-round pick out of Alabama 2 years ago. He eventually was starting games for the Falcons towards the end of the 23 season. Again, he played at Alabama. He's played secondary. He was really well coached. I think, that's maybe Raheem Morris's area of expertise as well. Maybe a different regime. I know Ulbricht's, more of a linebacker. That's what he played for the Niners forever. But I think a player like that, fills in the cracks. You're not giving up the big play. You got a guy who can maybe make some plays. I think DeMarcco Hellams to me feels like the ultimate kind of glue guy in the defensive backfield that allows for your big time players like Jesse Bates III, AJ Terrell to make plays. Remains to be seen if Justin Simmons comes back. I'm doubtful that he and Matthew Judon will be on the team next year. Too pricey. They gotta get under the cap, let them walk. Maybe if they're still out there, unrestricted free agents for a while, maybe you bring them back at a cheap deal. That's kind of the stage it is with their careers, kind of on the back nine. But I do think losing Hellams, that was a bad sign. That was one where like I saw the injury. I'm like, this doesn't look good. And I knew how important he was to the team during his rookie season. Again, a player that I think that Terry Fano hit on outside of the first round. Same with Matthew Bergeron, Clark Phillips III, maybe Bralen Trice. We'll see what happens. But this is the player that I feel there's certainly. He's under contract. He's only going to be a third-year player for this team. I think having him being fully healthy coming into next year, being more confident, he can make an impact to really help elevate the secondary. Because if you're just a little bit better in the secondary and just a little bit better in the linebacking core, then it makes your defensive line look a little bit better. All three levels of the defense help each other out. And I think the secondary should be this team's strength. But I think getting him back certainly raises the floor. Now, as far as Bralen Trice is concerned, I was very bullish on him coming out of Washington at the time because I didn't understand the Penix pick because of Cousins. Now I feel like an idiot. We all do. That's okay. it's hard for people to think exponentially. We can really only think linearly. I almost messed that up, but you're looking at a guy who is a well thought of recruit for Washington, played for a national championship there at UW. It felt like a very obvious pick because he had the ties to Jimmy Lake at Washington. He was teammates with Michael Penix Jr. the last 3 years, both this past year and then the 2 years that Penix was at Washington. You're looking at a guy that could potentially be, a stud edge rusher like Arnold Ebiketie was thought to be coming out of Penn State. A lot of thought, but again, we don't know what he's going to do at the next level. I do know that the defense is going to be very much in line with what we saw with the Rams the previous few years, and maybe the Falcons with Ulbrich, Quinn, and Morris. So we've kind of seen what this could be. And I'm not saying I have a fear, but maybe Trice is more of a speed guy like Vic Beasley was. That's kind of why I'm kind of dubious on taking James Pierce Jr. Again, what do I really know? I don't really know that much about building a roster or anything like that. I'm not a fan of this team. I just kind of know what I see. I kind of go more for the narrative thing. I think Trice could be a great player for this team, but we need to have guys who the Falcons take in day 2 be impactful. And I thought him not being really much of a factor with this rookie class hurt the Falcons. I think they were expecting him even more so than Rick Herrera or Brandon Dorlus, who I think are going to have bigger roles in the defensive line. I think he was going to be a bigger player for them. We saw J.D. Bertrand contribute a little bit more in rotational linebacker roles, certainly on special teams. Very obvious to see with his guardian cap on. But Bralen Trice is essentially Arnold Ebiketie's security, and it gives you the opportunity to move on from Lorenzo Carter if you feel inclined. So I think these two players missing all of last year did not help the Falcons at all. It wouldn't have made them exponentially better. It might have made them marginally better. I think having them back there maybe would have made the team maybe 1 win better, and we're 9-8 and maybe win the playoffs. That's what I'm talking about. These things are razor thin. You can't say injuries because this is a game. This is a collision sport defined by injury. But when your depth takes a hit like that in the first preseason game, that sucks because you are expecting these two guys to be, rotational defensive backs in Hellams' case, or rotational defensive and outside linebacker in Trice's case. You just hope that having a year to recover, they're going to come back and really be the boost that this team needs. Lord knows we're hoping for it. And finally, our last topic of the day, we're going to be coming to you from the highest perch in Flowery Branch. Atlanta Falcons tight ends coach Kevin Koger declined an opportunity to interview with New Orleans Saints for their offensive coordinator job. This is multi-pronged. So he spent his first year at the Falcons last year. Prior to that, he had been with he's a peer of mine, late 89 birthday. So he's 35. Played at Michigan. I believe he spent the year before the Falcons with the Chargers. So he's been around. And I know that he probably has some sort of rapport and connection with Kellen Moore. They were on the same 2023 staff in Los Angeles, Brandon Staley's final staff. But I think the two things that there's 3 things that really stand out to me. Number one, yes, I know you have some familiarity here. This kind of feels like, a Rooney Rule sort of sufficient sort of thing, just to try to say, okay, we got to get a new offensive coordinator in here. Maybe in time, Koger could be the guy. Maybe he's the guy who eventually replaces Zach Robinson internally once he becomes head coach in a few years. That's inevitable. But I think beyond that, beyond knowing Kellen Moore, I think there's also some belief that maybe this is not as big of a progression as you think, because the idea is if he were to go to the Saints, it would probably be more in a non-play calling role. And after dealing with Arthur Smith for 3 years, I have no time for that. I have no patience for that. I want my OC to take ownership of the play call and call the plays. I want my head coach to be head coach. The day and age of Dave Ragone, that is nothing for me. What's the point? There is none. It's dumb. So maybe Koger would not be that for the Saints. But really what this comes down to is, let's be real. Ever since Kellen Moore has been a coach, dating back to retiring with the 2017 Cowboys, going on the 2018 staff under, I guess, Jason Garrett at that point. Also was a coach on the Cowboys staff. It was also a coach with him from 18 to 22 in Dallas, 23 in Los Angeles, and this past year as the Eagles quarterbacks coach. That'd be Doug Nussmeier. Yes, the former Saints quarterback from back in the 90s, played, I think, at Idaho. This is the father of Garrett Nussmeier, the star quarterback for LSU, the potential number 1 pick next year. I'm not saying that like this is lining up for like the LSU quarterback to go play for the Saints, but like they're picking at 9 this year. They'd have to trade up or reach on Jackson Dart to get a quarterback. I don't see that happening. The Derek Carr contract's too punitive. They roll it forward with Derek Carr for another year, even though him and Kellen Moore had very interesting Mountain West history, playing for rivals at Boise State and Fresno State. If the Saints stink, which they might, they go get Nussmeier in the top 5 out of LSU, and he plays on his dad's team. I think because of the rapport that Kellen Moore has with Doug Nussmeier, he's more inclined to let him call plays. This may only be his first time being an NFL offensive coordinator, but he's held that role, I think, at 4 other stops in college football, most notably with Alabama under Nick Saban, and then under Nick Saban disciple Jim McElwain at Florida. I think he also held this role at Fresno State and one other school. But I think that's kind of more at play here. I think if a guy like Kevin Koger, who the Falcons think very fondly of at tight end, like the promotion forward's got to be more of like a it's got to be more than just in title. Like, because we don't want to see people leading for jobs where it's just like Ohio State, where it's like, okay, wait, Brian Hartline was already the co-OC, but he wasn't a play caller. Now he is. It's a promotion. It's really wonky. It's really complicated. But then you also promote Keenan Bailey to replace Chip Kelly, who you brought in last year. It's just too many cooks in the kitchen. I will say that if Kevin Koger gets the most out of Kyle Pitts next year, that could be a big opportunity for him. Again, I don't see Zach Robinson leaving the team after next season. I don't think he's ready to be a head coach. He just called plays for the first time ever, but like this past season. But in time, he may be the makings of that. If and when that day comes, and let's not be stupid and let Matt LaFleur out of the building. Like, why the hell did Dan Quinn allow that? That was so dumb. It's probably the worst thing he ever did. Although, I do like Steve Sarkisian, but like things were different. It just, that Mike McDaniel was on that staff too. And I'm just gonna leave it at that. So yeah, this was the Blog and Dirty Podcast. You can follow me, John Buhler, on Twitter or the X at Buhler118. Be sure to watch, like, comment, subscribe to the Blog and Dirty Podcast on YouTube. It's at Blog and Dirty /FS. Be sure to listen to the podcast on Spotify, Apple, anywhere there's podcasts. Be sure to read all my work on fanside.com. Be sure to read all of our Atlanta Falcons coverage on bloganddirty.com. There's also some stuff being put out there by, our betting team over there on ATL All Day, the former site that I used to run way back in the day, back about a decade ago. Yeah, they've been putting out some really good Falcons coverage too. There's a lot of stuff going on with this team. There's a lot of very exciting things going on across the board. I mean, free agency is almost here. I love free agency, even though I realize it's just a glorified garage sale. You're dealing with players that other teams don't want, but it's always fun. It's fun. It's fun to see the transactions of it all. NFL draft's great too. We'll definitely get kind of more into that. Again, this is the off season. This is the part of the year where I feel that I thrive and I can provide the most creative content here. Again, we're kind of moving forward. So on next week's show, it'll be closer to, I'll be coming to you guys live on YouTube about noon. And then I'm going to start thinking about bringing on other guests from other, fan-sided properties across here. This is the off season. Probably get Ian McMillan back on here once he moves back to Canada. My boss, Cody Williams, my fall star co-host, probably have him on here at some point. If there's anybody else you want to see back on the show that we've had on before, whether that would be Adam Patrick, Alicia de Artolos Castillo, Jeffrey Knox, Sterling Holmes, Scott Rogist, Braulio Perez. There's countless others people on here too that do a great job here for Fansided. So I'm gonna have a lot of people on here that are my colleagues that work really hard too. They may not be Falcons fans, but they can provide an interesting offseason take. Because again, with this show, it's how I like to consume football. I like to consume the NFL through the lens of a Falcons fan, but from like, the highest perch of Flyer Branch, looking at it from like a whole, not getting so micro, a little more macro, just to kind of get a better feel for what's going on, what this team is, and where it honestly could be going. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it for today's episode. So once again, thanks for tuning in with me, and this is the Blogging Dirty Podcast.